Hi, everyone. I think I'm live on YouTube now. Can you send me a chat message and say if tell me if you could hear me? How are you? If you could hear me in the chat. All right, and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our first webinar session on flexible learning principles on distance education. And right now, I am so happy to welcome you. Um, right now, I am with a few two special person behind the stage, backstage, our virtual backstage and Zoom. I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Venus Alboroto from Surigao City National High School and Dr. Wilma Manyo. They have been the first few people who have gone on board with our plan on to do webinar workshop. So if you've noticed, the Empower Ed is an education advocacy that I have founded a year ago. It's really the idea really of Empower Ed is to elevate the teaching profession in the Philippines, to tell the story of the Filipino teacher, and to celebrate the Filipino teacher. And I am so thankful right now because I have people who have been supporting me. And when we thought of this webinar workshop, I just want to say thank you to Director Marge Ballesteros of the DepEd, Department of Education, International Cooperation Office, and our group chat, who has been very encouraging in pushing this. So just to, the first schools who have really invited me are Surigao City National High School. I think this is their part of their inset right now. Um, Maligaya Elementary School of Ma'am Wilma Manyo, and of course her student in Pacific Intercontinental College. Am I right? And of course, we have another teacher who has also invited me. His name is Romel Edoria, from Palanan Elementary School in Makati City. I think this is part also of their Inset or Brigada Escuela. So, and when we decided to do this, we thought of maybe we can extend this to a lot of schools who would want to join us. And right now, the registration actually reached around 3,000. And I'm just thankful. If you are not here right now, it's okay because we will make the live stream public. So for those who are here, I'm monitoring the chat also. Dr. Venus and Dr. Wilma are on backstage, virtual backstage, trying to navigate also and help me see the comments here. But yeah, good afternoon. I am happy that you are here. I'm now going to start my session. Okay. So let me just share. I'm just using Zoom, live streaming in YouTube, and forgive me if there will be some technical concerns or technical problems right now. There, I'm just gonna uh, present this. Dr. Venus, could you see if the slide is showing? All right. So Dr. Venus on the background says this is showing and it's on live right now in YouTube. So flexible learning principles in blended learning on distance education. I want to treat this as our first session. Later on, I will announce that we will have another session. We will have next session around next week. We will announce that also. But I want to start right now with the idea of flexible learning. However, I just want to have, I'm plugging in and I just want to be happy and transparent with this. There is actually a company, a small startup that who contacted me and said that, the founders are actually teachers or former teachers. They are now in their own business and they want to extend help to a lot of teachers. So they partnered with me to bring exclusive webinar workshop. The name of the company, the brand is Ignidio and Leonides. Their Facebook is on screen. What are they offering? They are offering affordable leather materials. leather stuff that you can have. If you've noticed in on the screen, I posted there. I'm not their endorser, but they have collaborated with me to create this webinar workshop, and I just want everyone right now to show appreciation. You can take a screenshot of this or write it down. Their Facebook address or account is there. Ignidio and Leonides. They're making a lot of leather stuff. Like for example, right now while live streaming, that's actually how my work from home table looks like. All right, and then you can have different table mats for your work from home. You can have keychains, leathers, or even like leather wallet, and then of course placemats for your dining set. The people behind this were former teachers who have done their own businesses, and they just want to extend their support right now. And they enabled me, they supported me to bring webinar workshops. So please take time later on, take a screenshot, visit them. Let's show our love and appreciation. You can order. They're one of the most affordable. They're offering a lot of affordable products right now. And of course, later on, just a how do you call that, a surprise. This is not a surprise anymore, but I'm announcing it on September. We will be having our first anniversary at Empower Ed, and they actually will be donating some material, some stuff that we can raffle off during our first anniversary. So please show love to them. Please show love to Igmedio and Leonidas through our partner, Mr. Regan Austria, one of the co-founders, a former teacher. So please show some love and support for this company who are supporting their teachers right now. So these are the most affordable leather. So it's your education leather supplies at home. So there. Okay. I just want to start also with some the last promotion that I have. I have an Empower Ed podcast, and I talk about online distance learning. This podcast episode has been very helpful to a lot of teachers. It's actually one of our top episodes right now. And I have different episode, short 15-minute episode. If you have time, you can go to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, subscribe to Empower Ed podcast with Jim Toscano, and then scroll down the episodes that I have. My podcast is actually, well, not to modesty aside, but the Empower Ed podcast has been charting in countries like the Philippines, Qatar, Indonesia, Singapore, Australia, and even in Canada and Great Britain. Um, we have a podcast where we talk about different challenges, opportunities of education in the Philippines and on the whole world. And there's a special series called Online Distance Learning Series. So please do take time to visit this one. All right. So this is an additional resource material. For those, I know that Ma'am Wilma invited her students in education courses on her education course, and she also invited another co-league and her students to be part of this. So for those who are studying to become future teachers, this could be a very helpful resource for you. All right. So let's start. What is our main session today? The simplest idea is, let's just understand why we're doing distance education. And when we understand the why, the how, and what of distance education, I just want everyone to focus on their context, right? I'm pretty sure you are now very much preparing for it. Modules might have been written and given to you. You might now be preparing your own instructional materials. You might be thinking of your assessments. You might be thinking of enrollment right now. But I want us to be in a single, in the same position, same place. And the first thing that we need to understand is, what is distance education? Why are we doing this? And the path that we are going to take today is from Simon Sinek. So search for Simon Sinek for educators, for all of you. I want you to take down later on and search Simon Sinek. He's a very popular speaker. He's a famous speaker, and he talks about a lot of things, a lot of topics that will be helpful for educators. And one of the things that I love about him is the golden circle. In the golden circle, he tells us that, to in order to make something successful, whether it's business, whether it's a project, a lot of educators are doing their own projects, di ba? You are being asked to do your school improvement plans or projects or whatever. It always Simon Sinek tells us that it is always helpful to start with asking ourselves, what is our why? We need a clarity of why. The clarity of why reminds us that we should understand what's the purpose of doing these things. What is our belief? What is our cause? In distance education, we ask ourselves, why are we doing distance education? Why are we trying to learn a lot of modalities right now? Why are we trying to adjust to the pandemic right now? And after understanding our why, we go to how. How reminds us that the processes that we want to have should be very very clear. This is our why. We want to do distance education, but then we ask ourselves, what is the process? How are we going to do it? Right? And after the how, we now go with the what. We know why we're doing it. We know how we're gonna do it. But the question now is what? Ano yung ituturo natin? What are we going to teach? How are we going to design our modules? How are we going to design our assessments? Right? So we will follow this pathway: why, how, and what. It's always important with asking ourselves, why are we doing this? For school leaders out there, be always this is one thing that I want you to remember. When you do some projects and when you ask your teachers to do something, always make sure that your reason of doing that is clear. And do not get mad if teachers ask why. When teachers, and even teachers, when your students ask why, don't get mad, because that means that they want to understand the things that is being done, the things that are being done, so that they can do them well. All right, so let's start. What is our why? I will just speak shortly about this, but our why right now is understanding today's context and needs. What is our context? Again, life is not normal right now. We talk about the new normal. Even the new normal is not normal, right? The new normal is not the normal that we wanted to happen. It's not the normal that we had before, right? So the new normal is not normal. Why? Because there's a crisis. And right now we are very very scared. We talk about safety, security, well-being. These are very very important. These are essential. Who among of you are parents? Who among of you are grandparents? I'm pretty sure you are scared for your children's well-being and health, right? Right now, I just want to be personal also, and I just want to be transparent. I'm a little bit happier right now. Dr. V knows, my friends would know that I've been very, very stressed aside from preparing for our school year. But I think I've shared to a lot of my friends that in my place we have COVID cases. And today we just received the news that they are now negative. Oh, they yun had they, which means it's more than one. Okay, they had their swab test, and they're now negative. We're very much happy, but again, even if they have been tested negative, we need to make sure that there's no transmission in our building. So we want our safety and security and well-being. And I talked to my school and I told them that because we are doing some clearances and then we need to do some things in school, I told them that I cannot go yet because we need to observe security and precautionary measure. And my school said it's okay because this is the first thing that we need to do: safety and security. That is the thing that we need to understand. Right now, there's no possibility really for face-to-face teaching. I think it was so hard for us to understand the moment we were thinking of that in May and June. But as we are racing against time. If you've noticed, we are racing against time. We are preparing our schools, our teachers, and even our students for this kind of measure. And one thing that we've realized is it's really hard right now to do face-to-face interaction, right? There's no face-to-face classes. However, it doesn't mean that education should stop. Face-to-face classes will have to pause and be stopped, but it doesn't mean that education should stop. But if we notice, there is a big gap right now. And that big gap is something that I want to push because this is something that we don't understand. We're not doing distance learning because we just want to. We need to understand that we are in an emergency remote learning. For some schools who are doing online distance learning, they're not doing online distance learning because kaya nila, di ba? It's not that. It's not because they don't want to go to school. It's because there's no other way, right? There's no other way. Can you imagine a society with no education? I appreciate some discussions, like for example, can we do academic freeze? Like for this, we will not yet have classes. But even if you look at other countries, no country is doing academic freeze because there are certain challenges and great effects that would go with it, right? So we need to understand that we're doing emergency remote learning because it's not possible to do face to face, and there's a state of public health emergency. That's the first reality that we need to understand, and that is our context. I hope we are not asking anymore, pwede pa bang mag face to face? Kasi talagang hindi pwede. So now that we have understood our why, that is our primary why. Now that we understood our why, now we can proceed with the other planning, other types of preparation. And I just want to bring here, most of us most of us did not really go training for distance education. A lot of us, right? This is one thing that we need to understand because our way of training our teachers, even in teacher education institution, we don't have a course on distance education. We have maybe a course on alternative learning systems, but not really on distance education. I, for one, I am enrolled in the University of the Philippines, Open University. My master's, it's in distance education. So just to be clear, there are universities that offer online learning, distance education. UP is one of them. I just want to tell you, I applied for UP. I've never gone to UP, UP Open University. I paid my enrollment online. Um, I did my studies online. I did my group work online. I submitted my assessment online. I did my comprehensives online. So those kinds of things. It's not unimaginable because distance education has been there. It's just that we were not used to it. And one of the most important ideas of distance education is transactional distance. Okay? Oh, I want you to take note of this because this is very, very important. If you have not heard about this yet, you're very lucky, you're very fortunate because this is one important principle that we need to understand in distance education. What does transactional distance mean? Transactional distance means that there is a gap between students and teachers, okay, or learners and teachers. Transactional distance could be physical, or it's not could be, it's really physical, right? Teacher is at home, work from home, and then students are in learn from home mode. And it's not just one location for students, they are scattered around the community. They might be even in another barangay or in another town. I've talked in Region 8, I talked to higher education colleges and universities, their presidents and deans. And one thing that they realize about transactional distance, physical, some of their students are not just outside their city, they are even in other provinces, Visayas to. So that means there are other islands. They are living in other islands. So if you've noticed, transactional distance already tells us that, hey, teacher, when you design your module, when you teach in distance education, whatever modality it is, remember, your students are not in front of you. So pag naggumawa ka ng module, lalo na pag print-based modules, sana naman dun wala ng group work. Right? Sana wala ng group work kasi wala naman siyang kagrupo. Right? We now have to make sure that our modules or the lessons that we're doing or writing are just for single individual student unless you do online learning, because technology can now help mediate, put on interaction. But transactional distance is not just physical. The effect could be psychological. Psychological in a sense that it makes a difference when students are in one place. 'Di ba? In one place, there's a sense of belonging. They are part of their class. Can you remember your intramurals when the spirit of class camaraderie, 'di ba? Brotherhood, sisterhood, they will fight against they will fight against another section just to show that they are one, that they are united. In physical classrooms, there's a sense of community. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of trust. Um, I've heard from other teachers that one thing that they have realized that maybe some students see their teachers as the positive role model that they have, because at home they don't have a positive role model because they belong to families that may have challenges. So it makes a difference that they see their classmates, their friends, and their teachers. In distance education, it's very challenging to do that, right? Especially if you're doing modalities that do not have ways to connect students and teachers, right? In online distance learning, you can do that kasi you have video conferences. However, let us think of different ways. How can we then make sure that maybe is it possible to ask our students how they are? Pwede bang gumamit ng cellphone? Pwede bang gumamit ng Viber? Kung wala silang magamit, baka pwede din tayong gumamit ng radio. Kung meron tayong kakilala, kumustahin lang natin sila over the radio. Para hindi lang klase, hindi lang academic yung pinag-uusapan natin. Remember, the school is not just about academic development. It's also about values formation. It's about character formation. It's about building psycho-emotional, right? So, so how do we do then? How do we do then this kind of problem? Transactional distance is just simply reminding us that when we do distance education, remember the psychological effect. So it's good. I appreciate. I have some friends in New York City. She's a principal, Dr. Nadia Lopez. You know what she did? She writes letter and sends them to students if they don't have internet. If they cannot do online distance learning and they do print-based learning or learning packets, they call them learning packets. She includes notes. I also heard of other teachers in India, they insert notes for their students saying, how are you? Notes of prayers, notes of encouragement. That's bridging the effect of transactional distance in the psychological way. So maybe that's one thing that you could do when you create your modules. When you send them, maybe you can add in something about character formation, processing, right? Something that you could add. And then of course, I think this is what the one that we are so focused about: pedagogical effect of transactional distance. Diba, in the classroom, let's be more give a clear example of transactional. In the classroom, for example, you are teaching. I know Dr. Venus Alborutos is teaching science. Maybe she's teaching physics, for example. Si Dr. Venus, award-winning teacher na yan. Ang dami niyang ginagawang Sims material. Pero at some point, si Dr. Venus, isipin niya, bakit kaya yung student na nasa harap ko, who's in front of me, parang hindi, he or she does not get what I'm teaching. Parang on our side, we always say we have a different wavelength. I'm here, he's here. Kahit kaano ka explanation ng ginagawa ko, hindi kami mag-meet, right? Or it could be something like, he is physically present but mentally absent. That's the pedagogical transactional distance if in the classroom. Now, can you imagine in distance education when students are doing self-paced learning? If they don't get something, if they don't get the lesson, whom are they going to ask? Is it their parents? What if their parents do not know the answer also? Right? So when we understand transactional distance pedagogical, we are now being asked to reflect, hindi lang pala ganon kasimple pagbibigay ng module. Paano yung feedback? Is it enough also to put the answers at the back of the module? right? What if they don't really understand, for example, math or maybe higher chemistry, di ba? Yung physics, high school chemistry and physics. I do remember kahit mag-study ako on my own, it's really hard for me to understand some equations. Whom do I ask? My teacher. But it's because she's beside me. Now, if the teacher is not beside me, how do I do now? How do I think of giving feedback already? Right? That's why it's very, very important to understand the idea of transactional distance. The principle of transactional distance is reminding us that the physical, the psychological, and pedagogical effect of that big gap should be considered when designing lessons, when deciding your modules, even when you're thinking of your assessment, right? So consider those. So what is our purpose then? Distance education, distance education should minimize the negative effects of transactional distance. And then, if we want to minimize this, then we look at the modalities that we have. I'm pretty sure right now you have already decided about the modalities, right? The modalities that you have right now are based on the context of your school community, of the context of your students and their families. And distance education is always telling us that there's no physical face-to-face instruction. So how do we deliver then, right? Um, in distance education, sorry for that BKE there. There's a BKE. I don't know why it's there, but modalities of distance education reminds us that there are three primary modalities of distance ed. Number one, it's correspondence. What do we mean by correspondence? This is the oldest form of distance education or modality. Correspondence means um, I send it to you. I'm your teacher. I send it to you. You'd send it back to me so I can check your assessment or I can give you feedback. That's correspondence. And in the earlier times, even in the 1800s, Industrial Revolution, correspondence is in the form of printed materials. So we send them, teacher sends them to students through postal system. Ang gamit pa noon kaya correspondence, postal system. Right now you can do, I don't know how you're gonna plan it, but I know that some schools are planning that there's a pickup system, parang drive-through system. There's a delivery system also. So however you want to do it. But in correspondence, we use primarily printed modules. Okay, modular. And then of course the other one is broadcast. Broadcast is TV and radio. Using TV and radio to deliver knowledge, to deliver information. But if you've noticed, correspondence and broadcast, it's a one-way system, right? It's a one-way system. Where is teacher there? Teacher is not actually there. We don't have a physical teacher, but we have what we call as the teaching presence. The teaching presence is now extended to the learning packets that you print, to the modules that you print, to the TV, to the radio show, through the video that you are showing. That's how you now extend yourself as a teacher. The idea of a teacher becomes now bigger because you now extend your presence through the printed materials that you've sent them, right? So everything that you send to your students are now extensions of yourself as a teacher. So you have correspondence, broadcast, but these are very limited. It's a one-way system. The challenge here is feedback. Let's talk about it later. And then, of course, you have digital learning. But the main challenge for digital learning or online learning is that it's dependent on the internet. It's one of the best modalities because we can now extend communication. It's easier to send information. It's easier to meet online. We can now how do you call that? We can now augment and put the classroom in another level, and that is the virtual level, right? But the main challenge there is if we don't have internet connection, if we don't have good devices, then it's not possible. Okay? So how do we now understand it? There's another modality. This is not a modality, but it's a blending of different modalities. Some schools that I've known in Hong Kong, for example, and in New York and in Australia, I know that a lot of schools have actually combined modalities so that those students who can do online will use online learning. But if they have classmates or if they have students who cannot afford to do online, they have printed modules. I don't think they are doing TV and radio right now because it's really hard to talk to TV and radio stations. But a combination of most schools are doing a combination of printed and online. It doesn't also mean that you can do exclusive. For example, if you're teaching kinder students, kinder grade 1, grade 2, diba, they have to practice their own, how do you call that? The tactile movements, handwriting. Even if you are doing online distance learning, you will still ask them to print or to have printed modules because they have to practice writing. They cannot do that digitally. So, in one way or another, at some point, even if you're doing online distance learning, there may be instances when you ask the parents or the students to have a printed worksheet, a printed exercise sheet so that they can practice writing. So especially for younger students or for kinder or grade 1 who's still practicing handwriting skills, kahit nag-online distance learning kayo, kahit nagti-TV broadcast radio kayo, you still have to partner it with printed materials so that they can practice hand movement, coordination skills. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if our students or if our teachers who are teaching in the younger years, right? You would agree with me that they still have to practice handwriting. So whether you are using broadcast TV or radio or digital, whether offline or online, you still have to combine it with printed worksheets. So another modality, this is not another modality, but this is another option that you could do is a blended learning modality. You combine the modalities. However, may I ask you also to distinguish this? This is clarification and caution. When we speak of blended learning, we need to be clear because there is another blended learning that we might not know. Blended learning approach is also an instructional approach. What does that mean? It's a way of teaching. It's a way of delivering instruction. Blended learning approach could happen inside the classroom or even outside the classroom. However, if you look at it, the basic consideration for blended learning approach as instructional approach is there is face-to-face teaching and there's technology integrated learning. Like for example, a station rotation, flipped learning, those are examples of blended learning and they happen in the classroom. So be careful with using blended learning approach. The other one, which we know right now, is called blended learning modality. This is a means of learning delivery. It's a combination now of distance learning modalities. So let's be careful when we're saying blended learning. Blended learning, we need to understand that it's a modality of learning delivery because that's distance education. But let us also remember that when we say blended learning, it's also an instructional approach, right? So let's be careful with that. So it's always safer to say we're using blended learning modality. Okay, that's much safer to use. Okay, especially when you're talking to other teachers from other countries or whatever, right? If you're reporting in an international conference also, it's always good to make that distinction. Again, the big question is modalities of distance education. Our big question is where is interaction? Where is interaction right now? Because we always want to do interaction so that we are able to give feedback. In correspondence, we now need to think how will I interact? How will now I interact with students, with my students, when they are simply using printed materials? Is it okay if I include my cell phone number so that they can call me if they have questions? Remember, feedback is very, very important, right? How about broadcast TV? Pag nakikinig ka sa radyo, wala, one way lang yan. I remember in the 1990s, during summertime, I stay with my lolo. My lolo, there's no signal of TV. It's a far. I'm an Ilocano. I'm from Abra. That's where I was born and I was raised and grew up. My lolo's town is still far from the center of the province, and every summer I would go there, and there's no TV because there's no signal, there's no cable. We only have radio, and we know that radio is a one-way system. So even if we deliver content or information through radio or even TV, how do we now give feedback to students, right? That is one thing that we need to understand. In digital learning, it's possible that the apps that we are using or the apps or software that you're using, they can give automated response. Like for example, quizzes, like the online offline quizzes, they can add feedback already to to the student if their answer is wrong. But the big question is, how about correspondence and broadcast? Is it possible now that we can maybe include our cell phone numbers as teachers so that they can call us if they have questions? But if we are going to do that, maybe we also need to tell them that teacher has a schedule. You cannot call teacher 10 p.m. because teacher has life also. Teacher has family. So maybe we can set a schedule. I don't know if you will still give schedules to your students, but it's very good to give them a schedule. Maybe if during your period or your class and they're doing independent learning at home, they can call you during those times if they have questions. So that's one way of fostering interaction. In digital learning, online digital learning, that's very, very easy to do. But again, always remember feedback. How do you want to give feedback in the different modalities? And how do you want to foster interaction? In terms of feedback, let's talk about them next session when we talk about assessment. How do we deliver formative assessment? How do we do summative assessment in distance education? We cannot cover them right now. We will not have much time, but that's our next topic on our next session next week. Now, where is flexible learning here? Where is flexible learning at this time around? Flexible learning, flexible learning will have to come out in the way. Sorry, I'm just fixing something.
Flexible learning will come in a way in the way we will have to plan our modality, right? Flexible learning could come out in such a way that number one, we ask our students what's their context, at home. I'm dep ed through the teachers, through you, and of course, even in private schools, they ask for surveys to be answered, right? That's one way of asking what's the context. Can you are you able to use internet at home? Do you have learning devices at home? Do you have gadgets? Do you have laptops? If you have, how many? If you don't have, what other means would you like to learn? Would you be okay to learn with printed materials? Do you have a radio? Do you have a TV? That's one way of understanding the context of your students. That's flexible learning. However, what I want to point out also is whatever modality that you will have should also adapt to the needs of the students. Is that if that is not clear, let me explain again. We are deciding on our modality. That's based on the context of our students, their families, and even sa teacher. Right? You cannot impose online learning, if your teachers live in a mountain and there's no internet connection. That's very difficult, right? So if we have chosen a modality, we now want to also make sure that the modality that we are using adapts to the needs of the students. That's two-way, right? Adaptive means we now look at this lesson or module. How do you call it? How can we now contextualize it? Maybe the more common term that we use is um, contextualization. All right. How can we now contextualize it? So when we look at context in flexible learning, we now ask ourselves, how do we then do this? what are the essential consideration for distance learning so that we are able to look at the context and adapt to the context of our students. Number one is ensure equity. Equity among students and teachers first. This means that everyone should have access. A lot of people would know that I am for equity and empowerment of students and teachers. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have distance education that leaves a student behind. It's very hard to do that. We don't want to choose and say, we want to do online distance learning. Pag walang internet ang mga bata, bahala na sila. You cannot do that. Because the job of the education system is to make sure that no one gets left behind. That's the job of the education system. So equity is very, very important. Ensure that everyone has access. For example, another example, how about printed materials? So we've chosen printed modules. Paano nila kukunin? Paano sila pupunta? Now you have to find another way of how to deliver it. I've heard that some divisions are going to partner with local government units. That's very, very good. That's very, very good because in the end, education is the work of a school community. And the school community involves the local government unit, the community around the school. So what we're doing right now is partnership, collaboration to make sure that no one gets left behind. I'm pretty sure you're saying sana all. Sana all kasi may ibang local government unit na nagdo-donate ng mga devices. You know, I think this is my personal opinion. This is really a test of partnership, of leadership. And we're just very happy. And you know what message we want to tell right now? We want to tell right now. I hope that more local government units, right, would help us, would help our education system. Kahit hindi na mag-donate ng devices. Kasi kahit mag-donate sila ng devices kung wala namang internet, 'di ba? Hindi naman yun eh. Maybe I know that some schools are asking for donations for printers. Kasi ang mahal mag-print ng module. It's very expensive to print modules. Ink, di ba? Ink, toner, those are the things I know that are a lot of schools. Some schools says, no, we will not do online distance learning. We've already decided because our students cannot do that. But what we're asking right now are printers. More printers, more toners, more ink. That's one way of ensuring equity. Also, one thing in terms of equity or access, also ask your students, baka may colorblind kayong students. 'Di ba? Kung may mga students kayong colorblind at ang dami-dami yung print na iba-ibang colors, iba-iba yung pagtingin nila. So when we say equity and access, that means considering also our students who have conditions. Okay? So make sure that you think about it. Second, ensure readiness of teachers. That's why we're doing a lot of webinars right now, a lot of workshops. Teachers will learn a lot of skills. You will learn a lot of skills. You need to learn a lot of skills for flexible learning. You know what they said? Flexible learning should meet flexible teaching. Teachers should be flexible also. It's not only the students who will have to do flexible learning. Teachers have to do flexible teaching. What does that mean? The way we taught a few months ago will not be the same right now. Right? Feeling ko ang daming mga teachers ang bababa ang hypertension level. Kasi ang mga students wala sa harap ninyo, hindi kayo atakihin sa puso. You know, that's one way of looking at it. But you know, our source of stress right now is creating modules or whatever, preparing. But that's one, you know, there's a takeaway, there's an exchange. But what I want to say right now is that's just a joke. That's the bright side of it. Bababa yung hypertension level natin. Tataas naman ang mga hypertension level ng mga parents ngayon for independent learning. But you know, ensure readiness. We're doing a lot of workshops. I'm pretty sure siguro pang ilang workshop yun na ito. But I just want you to remember that in every workshop that you attend, ask yourself, how am I going to apply this? Do not end up with a lot of certificates. Congratulations, you have a lot of certificates, but you need to ask yourself, how are you going to apply what you've learned? Be open to new things. And of course, number three, I always want to tell this: don't be too hard on yourself and your students. This is a new thing that we're going through right now. And even if we prepare a lot, there will be rooms for improvement because there will be mistakes. We will have mistakes along the way, and it will be very, very challenging because no one is perfect. Even if we prepare a lot, even if we do dry run, prepare this, prepare that, at some point, because we don't know what's going to happen, there will be some hiccups, there will be some challenges. But don't worry because that's failure. And we need to understand that failure is part of learning. 'Di ba? Ang perfect ba? Is there any perfect teacher? None. Is there any perfect student? None. Is there any a perfect person? None. No one is perfect. What we need to understand is we can be the best teacher that we want to be. Our students can be the best student that they want to be. But we can only become the best version of ourselves when we allow ourselves to learn and fail. What does fail mean? FAIL. It's our first attempt in learning. And if our first attempt in learning is a failure, it's okay. Because what matters most is what happens, what you do after you realize that you've committed a mistake. So don't be too hard on yourself. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are stressed right now. Isa sa mga tanong, paano ako magtuturo? Parent din ako. Magkatabi kami ng anak ko. Paano ako pag mag-online discussion? One time I was doing a talk. Sorry ha, I'm not a parent. I want to admit that I would not really understand how it will be difficult. But I have a cat at home. Kasama ko ang pusa ko. One time, I was giving a webinar workshop, tumatalon siya sa likod ko, at minsan, nandito siya sa harap ko. Right? Natatakot ako na baka i-off niya yung laptop ko or galawin niya yung keyboard ko at mawala yung discussion. Now, can you imagine how challenging for parents who are teachers also? That they will have to teach their kids also? So again, teachers, don't be too hard on yourself. Give yourself some room. Don't forget to take care of yourself. Don't forget to take care of yourself because coming a few weeks from now, we will become the new frontliners. Actually, tayo na nga yung new frontliners, enrollment pa lang. Right? Enrollment pa lang. I'm pretty sure you have a lot of stories. My mother is a public school teacher. My sisters, they are also teaching in the public school system in Abra. And I would call them and they would share their stories about enrollment. Ayan. And we have a lot of stories about enrollment. It's very challenging right now. But yeah, that's the beginning of becoming a frontliner for the pandemic right now. So cut yourself some slack. Give yourself a chance to breathe and pause. Kasi kung hindi nyo po kakayanin ito, sino pa po ang magtuturo sa mga students natin? Alright? For school leaders out there, don't be too hard on yourselves also. Don't be too hard on your teachers also. Right? Give yourself some time. I know some school leaders right now are making decisions overnight. Hindi na sila natutulog. And I admire the passion and dedication. But of course, don't forget to ask the teachers how they are. Teachers, don't also forget to ask how your school leaders are. No one is asking them how they are. That's one. I've talked to some school leaders, and that's one of their hindi naman heartbreak. One of the things that they want to happen. Sana may nagtatanong din sa kanila how they are right now because wala din silang ibang makausap. Right? So again, number 3, don't be too hard on yourself. 4, can I say this with much I don't know because I have author friends. I have friends from the publishing companies. And they partner with DepEd, they partner with a lot of schools, and they help a lot of school communities. And their only request right now is please respect copyright of published materials. Number one, let's avoid, taking materials that are not free. You know, on tomorrow morning there will be a live session of Empower Ed concerning module making, creation of text-based learning resources. One of our guests is actually a very good librarian. She's the head of a of a group of story writers, and she will teach us tomorrow how we can look for materials that are free, materials that they can be used, stories that can be used, okay, without thinking of the copyright prohibitions. So this is one way of exercising integrity and honesty as educators, ha. Educators, you are teaching your students to be honest and to practice integrity. But copying materials without permission is not one of the best examples that we can give. And of course, use appropriate materials. 'Di ba? A lot of you are practicing quality assurance. Let's be more mindful of that. Let's be more mindful. Let us not be afraid to tell our fellow teachers and tell them and remind them that, this is a material that is copyright. Please, let's not use them because this will be distributed to everyone. Diba? It's not good. It's not good also. So that's one way of looking into that. Now that's number 4. Number 5, I don't want to speak much about it because this will be our next session. Is it possible for us to rethink test or assessment and even possibly grades? Yung tests and assessments right now, I don't, for you, distance education, print-based. For print-based, you might be asking, paano kayo ma-assessment? How are we going to do assessments right now? We can give them quizzes, long tests, even projects, but how are we sure that they're the one doing it? The simple answer there, we cannot be very, very sure. We are just trusting our student. We trust our students and our parents that the students will be the one answering them, and that the parents will practice honesty and integrity and model it to their kids, right? Sa mga anak nila. Kasi in distance education, that's very much, kahit sobrang ganda yung assessment natin, we always want to have the best assessment. Practice tests, worksheets. But our concern right now is paano kung mag-cheat sila? Kung mag-cheat sila, malalaman ba natin? Baka hindi rin, di ba? So parang pinapahirapan din natin yung sarili natin. Let's trust our students and our parents. If they cheat, if there's a parent intervention, sinong nawalan ng opportunity? Who lost opportunity to learn? Is it the teacher? No. It's the student, right? And right now, we want the parents to be our partners. We want them to be our partners and models of honesty and integrity at home. How about grading system? I'm praying, because in some schools overseas, in Hong Kong, Australia, they have suspended honor system. Why parents are why students are grade conscious? It's because their parents are the one pushing them. Competition, dapat number 1 ka, dapat perfect ka. Right? There is this kind of stress. And that's okay. Pushing our children to do better. But there are a lot of studies that says students get pressured because of parents wanting them to get high grades. They put pressure on themselves. They're not happy. They're scared. Natatakot silang magkamali. So therefore, when they go out in the real world, they're the ones who will not be very, very courageous to take risks. So there's a negative effect of too much pressure on students. Right now, distance education, if we remove honor systems, maybe this is just a recommendation. If we remove honor systems, then we remove the stress by parents. Ang parents naman, minsan sila na yung nagko-compete. Let's be honest with that. You ask the student, wala kang pakialam eh. Masaya lang siya na nakapag-aral kasi nandun ang friends niya at natututo siya. Right? So what do we do now? In distance education, maybe we can suspend honors system. Kasi kung may honor system pa rin, ay good luck. Lahat kayo, lahat ng mga students nyo, highest honors or first honors, right? And as educators, as statistician, that data could be very, very unreliable without question. Right? So maybe that's one thing. Let's talk about assessment in our next session, and maybe we can explore how do we do assessment in distance education. And then, of course, for online learning, I'm happy that there are some schools who will do online learning. I am advocate of edtech integration of using technology tools. But my reminder is, pag hindi kaya, wag pilitin. Okay? Pag hindi talaga kaya, wag ipilitin. However, for those who are going to do online learning and they ensured that everyone has access, that every student will have access to it and every teacher will be able to teach well with digital learning, my last message is on how you will do it. Number one, ensure that students' digital skills are enough and ready. If you belong to a school that will do online distance learning, ask yourselves, sino kaya ng mga kinder student? Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3? Paano pag wala pa silang computer class? Who's gonna teach them? Right? Do the digital skills. You don't say parent. What if the parent has a work during the day? Who's gonna teach them? Some schools, to enable online distance learning, they are doing some orientations and dry run, and they're teaching the students how to use the learning management system, LMS, how to use Zoom or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams. So it's very, very important that you prepare your students ahead of time. You can give orientation, you can give workshop to parents and students if you're going to do online learning. All right? So that's the how. When we do distance learning, when we do flexible learning, we want to make sure that the how, the process is very, very clear. So there should be equity, everything should be, the processes should be clear, teachers should be ready. All right. Now, let's move to the next part, the what part. So how are we now going to establish distance education program? Number one now is you need to activate adaptability and flexibility. How or where? In course design and delivery. What do you mean by adaptability? Adaptability means that if this is the basic module, it should adapt to the different contexts, especially if you're doing blended learning. If you're doing blended learning modality, you should be able to make sure that this basic design is transferable into this modality and into this modality, pero they are still equal. Do you understand that? Hindi pwedeng mas maganda ang online learning experience kaysa sa printed learning experience because you have now promoted inequity there. So we need to make sure that we look at the basic design and then adapt them to the different contexts. That's adaptability. So why is context important? Again, this is just a review. Number one, to ensure that learning experiences are inclusive. No one gets left behind. That's the meaning of inclusive, and context adaptive. However, whatever modality that you decide, it should adapt to the needs of the students. Second, speaking of needs, we should accommodate their needs and current learning background and context. Those are just two connected ideas. And then, of course, to help educators design courses that can adapt to various modes of delivery. This is flexibility. Okay? And then, just to remind ourselves that there is no one-size-fits-all design. Can we remember that? There is no one-size-fits-all design because you are now going to teach students from different contexts. So how are we going to do this? This is a basic procedure. Number one, you start with the basic design of the distance learning course, or maybe the module, or maybe the content of the module. That could be your, what is your MELC, most essential learning competencies, what's your assessment, what's your, what else, learning experiences, your knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or whatever. It's basically the basic design of your lesson, of your module, or your unit. Okay? And from there, so you specified your learning goals or objectives or your competencies, and then you have your assessment planned, and then you now have your learning experience, yung how they would acquire knowledge and skills. That's the basic design. From that basic design, you now contextualize it. Contextualizing it now, which means that this basic design should be undergone by students very, very effectively kahit printed, kahit offline, or kahit online. What are we ensuring here? Why are we starting with a basic design? Because we want to ensure that there is equity. It's fair. Hindi pwedeng sobrang ganda yung online modules kasi ang daming online apps na gagamitin. Tapos yung printed, sobrang bahala ka na student. Independent learning. Right? That's why I was asking you a while ago, maybe when you think of interaction in your class, hindi pwedeng zero interaction in printed and offline modules, pero 100 perfect interaction percentage in online modules. That's one thing that I want. That's why I started with basic design. So that when you contextualize it into the different modalities, the basic components are there. I hope this I'm making this clear. Why? Because when you design your assessment, for example, you cannot grade your student and say, "Uy, ang ganda ng pinasa niyang project kasi gumamit siya ng online tools, ng apps." Tapos yung project ng sa printed, ay hindi masyado maganda kasi printed eh. Walang other dimension. You cannot do that. That's why you always start with the basic design so that when you think of your assessment should say now whether it's printed assessment, whether it's an offline assessment, whether it will become an online assessment, it should be the same. Our rubrics and standards should be the same. Okay? So you're not gonna grade your students according to pinakamaganda. Ang hilig kasi natin minsan as teachers nakukuha tayo sa design. Nakukuha tayo sa pakapalan. Maybe this is the best time to teach our students and ourselves that, maybe the medium is not so important at all right now. Maybe the content is more important. So whether it's printed, pag nagbasa ang bata, handwritten, knowing niya, sinulat niya, as compared to sa isang student, gumawa ng PowerPoint, gumawa ng video, isipin natin yung content. Pareho ba sila? Sino ang mas nakakaangat in terms of content? Because from there, you will now ensure equity. You will now ensure fairness among your students. So always start with the basic design. From there, dun ka na lang mag-contextualize. Is that clear? So another example, in terms of what if, I want to tell them the story of ano ba yung story? I want to tell them the story of the Battle of Mactan. So si teacher, yun yung content niya. So in order to promote equity and fairness, si teacher, susulat niya yung story printed, gagawan niya ng maybe audio for offline so that they can listen to the story. And then in online, whatever the content of printed and offline, dapat the same din yung content. Kahit video yung gawin niya sa online, dapat kung ano yung content, pareho. Okay? So that's one way. Of course, we cannot say, Sir Jim, can we ensure 100% that they are equal? Of course, they cannot be equally the same. Because in a way, if you use video, it adds another level of engagement. Diba? Kasi may nakikita yung bata. It's now audio visual. As compared to radio or audio-based, audio lang. However, what if you combine audio and printed? Audio visual. Right? So that's why it's important that you don't stick with one modality. Because if one modality is missing something, maybe you can augment it. Right? Maybe you can augment it with another learning resource. Okay? So there. I also want you to explore the three main types of interaction in distance and flexible learning. What's the first interaction? Student to teacher. Student to content, second, and student to students. Now, can you imagine now the different modalities? Printed-based modality. Is there a student-teacher interaction there? Medyo mababa, right? Medyo mababa. Kasi if it's printed or if it's offline digital or if it's TV broadcast, highest interaction would be student to content, right? Student to students, baka wala. However, what did we say? Maybe we can use other tools to mitigate, alleviate the condition. Can we use cell phones so that there is student to teacher interaction? Kahit sobrang kaunti lang, but the interaction is feedback giving. That's good. What if we say, maybe you can share your number to your classmate and your friends, and maybe you can interact together. Mababang level of interaction, but at least there's a student to students interaction. This is the reason why I, for one, will continue to advocate technology. Pero ang sabi ko, pag hindi kaya, wag ipilit. However, it should not stop us from demanding from the government, right? Better internet connection. Give your student access to technology. Why? Kasi in the end, online distance learning will be very, very superior. Right? Because in online distance learning, you have student to teacher interaction, student to content, pwede bang student to students. However, right now, because we're racing against time, we need to accept the fact that maybe at some point, we cannot do online distance learning and we have to maximize. I think that's the correct word right now. We need to maximize other modalities. Kung ano yung hindi kaya natin gawin, like interaction, feedback, hanapin natin ng paraan. That's the main challenge for teachers now. Okay? So there. But this is one learning that we need to get. At some point, those who have access to internet, to learning device, the sad reality is, mas mauuna na naman sila. Diba? I don't know if you have asked yourself that, if you have reflected, but in some way, we need to accept that that's the reality again. That's why we should not stop pushing. We should not stop asking the government to make the internet connections better, give access, right? Because in New York City, for example, they gave iPads to their public school students to make sure that they are learning. Diba? They support the parents. Yan na naman yung sinasabi natin, sana all. Diba? May mga local government units din tayo who are doing that because they see the importance of technology. But right now, that's a very unfortunate reality. And what we can do just now is to maximize the other modalities. All right? Lessons to units and modules. I think you don't need to learn much about this. But, there is now a transition. We're not going to do lesson 1, unit 1. In distance education, everything is in module, whatever modality it is. Whether it's printed, whether it's online, whether it's whatever modality, everything else is modular. Because we need to make sure that we take advantage of, kasi if you do distance education and self-independent learning, if you do lesson, students will feel overwhelmed. Ang dami-dami, di ba? So ano yung gagawin natin? We chunk lessons or themes, units, knowledge into modules so that we can hit essential learning competencies. Right? So that's not, some of you will not need to understand this because some are preparing for you to have your module. But this is the idea behind it. From lesson units to module. In distance education, everything is modular. It's chunking because it's self-paced learning, independent learning. However, for those writing modules there, it is important that every end of the module or in the middle or end or first part of the module, there should be a checkpoint. What does checkpoint mean? Checkpoint for understanding. Pag nagpabasa ka ng kwento, before sila mag-proceed sa next part, there's a checking for understanding. If you're teaching math or there's a calculation needed, before you give them the more difficult test, there should be a checkpoint for drills, right? So your modules should contain a combination now of the content, of the worksheets, of the practice test, the drills, everything should be there. Okay, that's very, very important. It's the same with online. In online modules, everything should also be following the same format. Okay, we are now on the last a few part of our course of our session. I'm gonna skip talking about balancing synchronous and asynchronous because this could be our discussion for the next meeting. But I want to jump to the next part. This one, I think this is the more important one. Some of you are asking, can we be very, very successful in distance education? You know, my answer really, it depends on your school culture. It depends on your school community. What do I mean by that? If you have a school culture that promotes collaboration, that promotes growth mindset, what does growth mindset mean? Having grit, having perseverance, saying that it's okay to fail. It's saying that we learn from our mistakes. If your school culture is like that, then I'm pretty sure that you will be able to prepare and sustain your distance education as one community. So it's very, very important that you collaborate and work together. But if your school culture is pataasan ng ihi, quote and unquote, paunahan lagi, doon tayo magkakaroon ng problema. The school culture should be a school culture of collaboration. Tulungan, magtulungan tayo. Kasi kung ano yung failure ng isang teacher, it's the failure of everyone. The success of one teacher is the success of everyone. Right? I think this is something that we need to recognize right now. The answer to the challenges in education at this time of the pandemic is not on the hand of one person. Hindi nasa kamay ng principal yan. Nasa kamay yan ng principal, ng teachers, ng parents, at ng mga students. That should be very, very clear. The answer is not on the hands of one person. It's on the hands of everyone. So ask yourself, baka this is the time to change our school culture. Baka this is the time that we bring in collaboration. Magtulungan tayo kasi in the end, it's the same challenge for every one of us. Okay? I've learned this from Dr. Dina Ocampo in one of the podcasts that I have. I interviewed her and we asked about flexible learning. You could look for my interview in my podcast in Spotify or in Apple Podcast. And you know what she said? She said that flexible learning happens when the capacity of schools and teachers meet the needs of the learners. That is flexible learning. What the school and teachers can do and are willing to learn so that they can build capacity. Okay? If they meet the needs of the learners, then that is flexible learning. Schools and teachers cannot impose what they want to do. They should be able to meet at the center and converge with the needs of the learners. The needs of the learner is the context. Okay? So when schools and teachers consider the context of the learners, the convergence, the meeting point, that's flexible learning. And that's from Dr. Dina Ocampo, and I want to thank her for this very, very wonderful reminder. And then in the end, we talk about the new normal, but one thing that I always want to remind the people that are listening to me, more than online learning, it is having the flexibility and adaptability to shift from one mode of teaching and learning to one another. This is what it means to teach in the new normal. To teach in the new normal means that one should have the flexibility and adaptability to shift from one mode to another. If we say that, okay, we're so happy, wala na yung pandemic, we don't know when the next pandemic will come in again. But our experience will remind us that, hey, pandemics can happen. Second, pandemics can disrupt classes. So therefore, whether there's no pandemic or there's pandemic, we should be able to tell ourselves and even our students that they can learn, that they can teach in whatever modality that we have right now. That's the ending of my session right now. Thank you, everyone. We have some questions that are posted, and maybe we can answer them right now. I'm also looking at the YouTube. We are also I'm also looking at the YouTube. I'm also looking at the YouTube stream right now to look for some questions. But I want to start with some questions already that have been sent through Mom Wilma and Mom Venus. There's a question here. When the how I think this is the Simon Sinek's golden circle. We start with why, how, and what. Uh, Francois, is this French? Francois Tadeo, Tanedo. I'm not sure if this is French, but this is a French name, so I'm gonna pronounce it in a French way. Sorry if I mispronounce it, but I'm gonna pronounce it because I'm Francis also. The French for Francis is Francois. So Francois Tanedo, why there is no when? Since we should know the timing, especially during this time of the pandemic. Why is there no? Why is there's no question or answer or consideration for when? Because I think it's Simon Sinek is telling us that maybe in our planning for any businesses. Remember, Simon Sinek's the golden circle rule is not really meant for pandemic. It's a procedural step. It's a way of thinking that could be used in any time. So it's not just for the pandemic. It's also for businesses, right? Or if you have a project. So that means that when you start thinking about your project or how you will do it, nandun na yung question na when, right? Why are you doing this? Because there's a pandemic. When are we going to do this? When it is allowed already. So things like that. So that's why there's no when there. Of course, that's also original from Simon Sinek. So maybe that's a good question, but I don't know the perfect answer to that because I just followed the golden circle, which I personally like. That's what I do. Every time I give a new policy or new rule in my department, for example, every time we conduct some projects, I always say, why are we doing this? I think that's the most important thing. Understand the why. Okay. There is another question from Romel. Why do we still include the use of radio for distance learning when students nowadays doesn't even use or have it? Um, I think this is a very how do you call that? Too much generalization, because for example, I from Abra, I am still aware that in some places in Abra, up in the mountains, there are families who use radio. They don't have TV because they cannot use it because there's no signal. There's no TV signal. But there are radio signals. Radio signals are much easier to how you call that to detect. So therefore, what's we are talking about radio because it's also a means for delivering information. But we're not saying that we're gonna impose radio. Again, flexible learning option, right? We need to understand that when we do flexible learning option, we're giving a lot of options depending on the context. So if in your context, no student is using a radio, then don't use it. But it should not tell us to remove it from the options, because there will be places in the Philippines who will not have access to other modalities. So I hope that answers. Again, the big idea of flexible learning, options. We have a lot of options to be able to accommodate all the students. Another question from Eileen. How would you ensure equity when learnings depend upon the availability of the gadgets or internet? Oh, again, can I just tell you that when this question assumes that you're going to do online distance learning, right? Because you mentioned it depends upon the availability of the gadgets or internet. Remember, flexible learning says if there's no internet, if there's no gadget, if there's no device, then don't use online distance learning. You need to get another modality, right? However, if you're thinking, what if you're going to do blended modality? Some are doing online distance learning, some are doing print-based. Then you need to make sure that whatever modality that student is using to learn at this time of the pandemic, there is a certain level of fairness, a certain level of fairness in terms of assessment, in terms of access to content. So kung ang content mo online is a video of metamorphosis, hopefully your print base will also have a diagram of the metamorphosis, right? And the explanation. So it's very, very important to even look at the learning resources that we have to ensure equity. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Eileen. But we need to be careful. Again, the question should not be anymore, paano kami mag-online distance learning? Wala naman kaming internet or device. Precisely. Huwag kayong mag-online distance learning. Kasi wala nga kayong internet or device. Right? So that should not be the question anymore. The more proper question is, what is the context of our students so that we can decide on the modality that we are going to adopt? That's the bigger question. That's the more important question. All right. Other questions? There's a comment here. The success of Taiwan and Vietnam should be an example of how they did battle COVID-19. Why we not model them where they still have face-to-face classes and no lockdown? Oh, by the way, I have some friends in Vietnam and Vietnam and Bangkok. They also suspended face-to-face. A lot of the schools actually in Southeast Asia suspended face-to-face. In one of the reports that I've written in for UNESCO, when we did our research, more than 185 countries have suspended face-to-face or closed schools. So, they did not, hindi ibig sabihin, nag-face-to-face pa rin sila. They had to suspend school. Case in point, for example, in Australia, in Singapore, even in South Korea, when they thought that everything went well already, they opened the school for face-to-face. What happened after? They discovered transmission or infections among students in schools. So what happened? They had to close them again. So that's what are we saying here? There might be no perfect system right now, but what we are telling everyone is we are thinking of the safety and security of everyone. Okay, I think that's also the most important part. So whatever model of fighting COVID, I don't think I can speak much about it. But what I want to remind everyone is that again we look back. Even IATF would remind us that it depends on the level of quarantines. But I think the president has reminded us that there will be no face-to-face interaction. You know why? If you've noticed, the second wave of infection are actually for the younger people. Diba? Yung mga schools kasi nagsibalikan na naman. So in some countries, that has been the observation. Of course, it's not a perfect observation from myself, but that's what I've observed from a lot of people. We have a comment here. I think this is about the radio. Yes, I am from Cagayan and I can relate to radio and TV issue. Is really a help for folks in remote places. Yes, I do agree with that because I grew up in Abra. I also know the situation in places that are far from Metro Manila. There's a question here from Amelia Marasigan. She says, "Sir, in your own point of view, what is the best flexible learning for DE?" What's my answer to this? Again, my answer to this is the best flexible learning is the one that will adapt to your context. Okay? I hope that is clear. The answer to the best distance education modality will have to depend on your context. Right? That is the most important thing that you need to consider. Another question. I think this is very interesting because some schools are doing online distance learning. Ernesto Spadilla says, "Sir Francis, do you think online learning can be more humane and holistic, even much better than face-to-face, provided that teachers are more creative and innovative in the use of technology?" Yes, of course. This is one thing that we need to ask ourselves. Bakit pag sinasabi nating virtual encounter, it's not authentic? Can I just give an example? Dr. Venus, I'm gonna give you an example. Dr. Venus's husband is working in abroad, overseas, right, Dr. Venus? Pag si Dr. Venus ba nag-chat virtually, Messenger or Viber or however sa asawa niya, does it mean that it's not authentic? Just because walang physical encounter? Dr. Venus, maybe you can unmute para alam naman nilang may kasama ako. Do you think that is not authentic, Dr. Venus?
Still, it's authentic of course, sir. No? Mas maganda
Right.
yung kesa walang communication at all.
Alright. Thank you, Dr. Vincent. Gusto ko lang pong may iba namang boses kayong marinig. But yeah, we always think that maybe online baka hindi authentic yan. At some point, we need to accept that maybe the question of authenticity will need to go beyond what kind of encounter. Whether it's virtual, whether it's physical, if there is much, that's why we always say on the first week that you will do classes, if you're gonna do online distance learning, wag kayong mag-lesson agad. Give time to know your students. Connect socially, emotionally. That's the first thing that you need to do, right? So that you'll be able to understand them, so that you'll be able to know them, to understand their context. That will make learning more authentic on online distance learning. I'm just going to tell you also, and I'm very proud to share that, in UP, Open University, I have met some friends there. And we've been chatting online. We've been chatting online too. And I've grown to be much close with them. I've never seen them in real life, by the way. One is in Saudi, one is in China, is in Quezon City. But we do interact with each other, and we feel it's authentic. So it's very possible they were my group mates when we had a project in distance education in UP in one of our courses. So it's very, very possible. All right. So I just want to give a shout out also. He's been very makulit. I have a former student there. Hi, Richard. There. That's your shout out, Richard. Okay. So we have 3 minutes left. Maybe one more question. One more question. How is online teaching better than classroom teaching? In this pandemic situation, it's much better to do online teaching than do face-to-face teaching. Why? Because if you're going to do face-to-face teaching, then you will risk everyone. I think we need to contextualize that question. In the pandemic situation, you should never ask yourself, are we going to do face-to-face teaching? That's a very, very dangerous assumption right now, or question, because it's not even possible. So right now, is it even valid to ask, is face-to-face better than maybe you can ask that question. There are a lot of studies that compare face-to-face to distance education, but there are also a lot of research studies. Remember, distance education is not an alternative mode of education in the bigger scheme of things. It is another mode of education. It's another field of education. It has its own pedagogical approaches. It has its own structures. So it's like comparing oranges and apples. Apples and oranges. They are the same fruits, but they're very, very different from each other. All right? So that's one thing that we need to understand. All right. So there are a lot of questions out there, but some questions are about grades and assessment. Kindly wait for the announcement and Empower Ed Facebook channel, a Facebook page. If you are not yet, if you have not subscribed yet, please go there and subscribe. I will be announcing the next schedule for our next webinar session. We will focus on assessments in distance education so that we can answer all your questions. And of course, I just want to give time and say my gratitude. Ma'am Wilma, are you there? Ma'am Wilma is with me at the virtual backstage. Ma'am Wilma, can you say hi?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Toscano, for the wonderful webinar. We learned so much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wilma. Dr. Wilma is actually
Hello to my students.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Wilma. Dr. Wilma is actually traveling right now, but she wanted to make sure that her students and her teachers she's with them right now. So thank you so much. So again, I'm very happy that you are here. Thank you so much for your support. Um, for those who are asking, will I be sharing my presentation? I will be sharing my presentation only to those who will do the evaluation. You will only do the evaluation. You will only receive a certificate of participation when you do the evaluation and when you also subscribe to my YouTube channel. If there's one thing that I want you to do, that's subscribe to my YouTube channel and share this also. So you will only, once you do the evaluation, you have to wait maybe around give me 1 week before I can send your certificate and a copy of the evaluation. I think that's a fair game for us. So okay, so that would be good. All right. So thank you everyone for spending your late Friday afternoon. I'm just plugging in. We have an Empower Ed live discussion on Facebook and YouTube tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We will talk about effective text-based learning resources. And I've invited the president of Reading Association of the Philippines and one of the best children's story writer and illustrator to explain to us how we can further enhance all learning resources that makes use of text. All right. So thank you so much. I hope that you keep yourself safe and healthy, and we pray for a better tomorrow, a hopeful tomorrow for our country and for the world. So thank you, everyone. Goodbye. And for those asking for the evaluation, I'm gonna post it in the Facebook later on at the comment or in the Facebook page. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye. Bye, everyone. Bye, Dr. Venus. Bye, Dr. Wilma.